Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CAE Sports. As always, I'm one of the hosts, Spencer, and with me is Christopher. And we have a very special guest with you guys today, and that is Eric from the Overwatch Toronto Beer League. Now, if you guys are sitting there going, wait, there's a beer league that plays Overwatch in Toronto? Absolutely, and Eric's here to talk about it. So, Eric, why don't you just give yourself a quick little introduction and what you do and what the beer league's all about?
All right, yeah, sure thing. Hey everyone, my name is Eric. I am the organizer of the Toronto Overwatch Beer League. I also go by Lunchbox. And yeah, we've been going for 4 seasons now, going on 5 seasons, where we play live in person at the Hive, and it's basically a recreational esports league that we play with at a competitive sort of level, but where there's no barrier to entry in terms of skill, and everyone's welcome, and it's a really good sort of communal social environment.
Yeah, so that's really awesome. Now, if you guys want to hear a little bit more about the beer league in general, we did a full podcast talking about that and Eric's background last year, so you can find that.
Yeah,
But
we'll
Eric,
put that,
can you just
in
give
the
us-
description.
Yeah, we'll put that in the description. But Eric, can you just give us a couple key dates for that are upcoming for the beer league?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe this will be coming out Friday the 28th, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So registration ends today. So if you hear about this and think, man, this sounds awesome, then don't hesitate. Get over to our website, overwatchtoronto.org, and sign up. We are at capacity for our actual team limit right now, but there are individual signups still available. So if you're an individual player that's looking to check this out, sign up today. It's literally the cutoff for season 5. Apart from that, this Sunday we have what we call our draft night. That's where we basically have everyone in. We kind of do some pugs to kind of get people acquainted and get to know one another, and then we do a team draft where all the teams that don't have like a full roster, they draft players that are available in the individual sign up, and they fill out their roster based on an SR cap system that we've implemented.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Awesome. So yeah, again, if you guys are interested in checking that out, we'll put the link and all that in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's just hop right into the games. It was a pretty big game for the Toronto Defiant this weekend. We actually played the Philadelphia Fusion, and although it for a split second looked like all of our nightmares were going to come true, right? Like for a split second, I was sitting there with my 3-2 prediction for Defiant was not looking great. But it ended up being a 3-2, really close game. Philadelphia unfortunately pulled it out. We couldn't do the reverse sweep. But with that out of the way, let's just give our thoughts. So Chris, Eric, what were some of the things that stood out for you guys about the Defiant's performance?
Chris, did you want to go first, or?
Yes, I'll go first. So Nevix ate 5 blizzards.
Yeah.
What in the world? He ate 2 blizzards on one of the maps.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. I know the commentators were talking a lot about how great Fusion's support line was and how they managed to keep the tanks alive and back from the dead, which is totally true. But I think Nevix deserves a little spotlight for literally being a garbage can of
just
blizzards.
scooping them up. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was so impressed with the way he really held his own this week, especially compared to his performance against Paris. He was like at least defensively very much like carrying his load, like toe to toe with Poco, and he was eating a ton of ults. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, at some point, I don't want to be the guy who's like, takes away from a good thing. Obviously, I think Nevix had a really good performance. At some point, though, it is also like, it's Ivy, right? We're Defiant fans. We did the podcast all of last year. We know how good Ivy can be, but we also know some of the weaknesses of Ivy, right? And sort of telegraphing those ultimates tends to be one of them. But I agree. I thought Nevix had actually a really good performance, and this is exactly what I wanted to see coming off of his. I don't want to say lackluster, but this was a Nevix I was hoping when we signed him.
Yeah, well, I do think that against Paris, he was kind of in a position where he wasn't able to excel. I mean, they ran a lot of sim, which just destroys D.Va, and he didn't go off of D.Va the whole time, so it was kind of it was working against him that game for sure.
Yeah.
Actually, I did want to pivot on that because you brought up sort of playing against Ivy. I was actually really impressed by Ivy by like through a lot of points of that game.
Oh my god.
Because I felt like
Mhm.
there were a lot of cases where unsurprisingly, Carpe demanded so much attention from Toronto, and they needed to focus on him. And then when Ivy had that space, he just like wiped out the team on like multiple occasions and just wreaked havoc on people when they ignored him.
Yeah, well, that one was in. I mean, we're jumping over a couple of different maps here, but when they did Temple of Anubis, it looked like we were going to be able to cap Anubis, and then Ivy throws a blizzard in the back and gets like 3 or 4 people, right? 2 at the blizzard, and he picks
Oh
2
my
more
gosh.
afterwards, and that was like such a carry moment. But that's what I mean by Ivy. Mechanically, he's always been gifted, right?
Oh,
like we
yeah.
saw him pop off on Zarya, and then obviously the whole communication thing came in where he didn't necessarily click with the English-speaking players. Initially, and there's the whole stuff behind the scenes that we've talked about on previous episodes. But when he's on, he's one of the best flex supports in the league, and in fact, I think his May might be the most impressive we've seen so far. When you take away the
Apart from her ult.
sometimes, yeah, exactly, apart from agilities.
Her alts.
Yeah, well, exactly.
yeah.
Ivy's ults. But that was always sort of like one of his biggest weaknesses, right? Was he gets engaged in a fight. Sometimes he, gets a little hot-headed and it's in the middle of things and he thinks it's winnable and it's not. Like he almost cost them. I don't want to say cost him the game, but like that when he threw that ult in with just him and I believe the Moira alive, and then Nevix eats it, and it's like, man, you can't do that in control. When the other team is like 60% cap, right? Like you have one fight you have to win, you're at 99%. They need that ult to win the game, right? And then he's luckily agilities telegraphs it a little bit, and then obviously Ivy, being as talented as he is, builds an entire blizzard in one fight and is able to put it down and turn the tides again. But no, I agree that he's been one of the most mechanically gifted mates I think we've seen so far. I'm happy to see him succeed.
And actually, in that duel as well, I just want to point out that there was at least one Nevix play that was pretty nutty where Ivy threw down the wall to actually throw his blizzard safely, and Nevix went up and over the wall and still ate the blizzard, which was just a really beautiful play.
Yeah, and you're
That
starting.
is the positivity of having 3-second thruster cooldowns. Don't know how possible
That's
that
about to
will be
change.
when you have when it goes to 4.
Yeah, but Maze Wall also gets nerfed, right? So
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
we'll see.
Yeah, maybe the game plan then becomes bust one of the like just immediately burst down one of those pillars, and then that's how you get your eat. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that.
Yeah,
Definitely some good dynamics there. And I also wanted to, I want to talk about the transition from the 2-0 to the 2-2. So obviously,
well, no,
Toronto-
before we get into that, because I wanted to talk about I mean, by far the worst this team looked was in the first matchup when, unsurprisingly, Surefour didn't play. I think that was one of those two things where my main takeaway from this game was there's 2 Toronto Defiants, right? There's Toronto Defiant when Surefour was in the lineup, and then there's Toronto Defiant when Surefour was out of the lineup. So I know you want to talk about the 2-2, but I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on, I guess, once again, they started without Surefour. It was the same we played against Paris. You saw Logix. I know we had Barora on the show last week. He gave an explanation of he wants to put Logix in a position, at certain points to call. Like, Logix calling is very important. But at some point, you got to look at the 2 losses, one versus Paris with agilities and Logix, and the one versus Philadelphia with agilities and Logix, and how we've played with Surefour in the lineup. You got to ask yourself, is it not just worth sacrificing some of the value that Logix brings to just keep Surefour in the lineup?
Well, I think there's a couple things to that. I mean, one thing that you can't ignore is that in week 1, Surefour and Logix in the lineup was probably their cleanest map.
No, I completely
they
agree.
dominated Havana. So I agree that I think Surefour is a crucial component to this team's success right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that actually necessarily precludes Logix from being in there with him, because Surefour's pool is so diverse that having him teamed up with him allows Logix to play the heroes that he really excels on. But I guess when you need to have that May, then it comes into that thing. But the other side of that as well that I just wanted to kind of point out too is that what I've noticed with Toronto is that the times where they've struggled the most is when they've been running this rush down Rhine meta. And I think part of the reason they're excelling with Surefour is because he's a big part of their dive meta, especially when they're running the Sombra.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way that they incorporate Logix more into their dive compositions, and maybe he can do something there. But Agility does so well in that as well. So I don't know. I don't know if it's all on Logix in that sense, but I do think that Surefour definitely is having a huge impact. That's
Yeah. So I just want to clarify my point. I wasn't suggesting Logix was the issue. I just wanted Surefour in the lineup because I completely agree. Actually, I think I would argue the cleanest map we've had so far this season is with Logix and Surefour in the lineup. I actually think Surefour's play style of being more passive, being a smarter player, better positioning, actually lends itself better to a hero like Mei than it does to like maybe like the aggressive McCrees that we're supposed to be seeing. So I'm not suggesting we take Agilities out because I don't think you can run the dive with Logix and Surefour unless it's like a Tracer Sombra dive. Like if that ever becomes meta, then I see it. Because obviously Agilities, Doomfist, and Genji, you want him on those heroes. I mean, I know Surefour played it in 2017, but I still think you want Agilities on that position. So I'm not putting this on Logix. I think Surefour just has to be there. Whichever one of composition you want to run, I think it should include Surefour. But the final thing was, although I do agree this team has looked best when it runs the dive compositions, I do have to give them credit. We're on King's Row, we ran that mirror. Because one of my biggest takeaways was, the team won, but did we just sort of cheese our way to victory? You know, with like running like a cheesy dive strat that nobody saw, but teams are going to counter it. But on King's Row, we went head to head with Philadelphia, running the mirror matchup, and performed really well. Surefour came in super clutch in moments, actually.
Yeah,
we performed really well at some points, and some points we got rolled.
At King's Row, no, we won the match. I mean, at some points,
we did win the
Philly's
match.
a really good team.
It was that's the thing that we have to of course appreciate too.
Yeah, we do. I think one of the points I really liked was second point, Havana or Rialto, where Toronto kept high ground and kept on dropping a person down to contest guard so it wouldn't move, and they just keep on pumping damage from high ground. They kind of played like a weird kind of passive dive almost, where they just use high ground to dive up and down, up and down.
Yeah, you mean Dorado, right? Dorado.
Well, it's Rialto Dorado. Yes,
yeah,
Dorado.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Oopsies.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really cool, but I wanted to touch on what I was going to touch on before.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason why they went from being 2-0 to 2-2 was scouting Carpe. So essentially, Carpe, a lot of reasons why he was getting really, really, really good value is because he was he's mechanically challenged, but B, he was in just wacky, great different positions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why, realistically, second map could have gone either way.
I completely agree.
Oh yeah, it was.
So I'm not going to count that as like a massive win. The only reason why they got a crazy win at first is because we didn't have optimal scouting during that. I think as we brought Surefour in and had proper scouting on Carpe, we managed to shut him down.
Yeah, and like we were talking about before, second map we seemed to deal well with Carpe, but then just Ivy had so much space that he kind of he popped off. But I agree, actually. I think they adapted very well to Carpe, and he really I think that's why they got punished in the first map, because he was just taking these angles and ripping through the team.
Yeah, and I think when a lot of people looked, because I think that this team, this game was actually heartbreaking. As much as positivity as I wanted to take away from it, and I don't want to be that guy who turns something that should be positive into negative, but this was such a winnable game. Like, not only do you want to get into the round 5, where I think back-to-back 99% caps for Toronto, we had the ultimate advantage, position advantage, should have won the fight, and in back-to-back cases, it was like Agility just really telegraphed a Mei ult, and it didn't work out, and they were able to kite and they get their own, and then Carpe hit a super clutch McCree ult. But Temple of Anubis, I mean, we have 5 ult. We have EMP, Nanoblade, Primal, and Nevix is like 87% to bomb, with you have EMP bomb combo, and you also have Nanoblade. Like, man, for that fight to go the way that it went, super disappointing.
Yeah, not to mention that that fight initiated with the Nano Blade being popped and Agility's having two picks. So
Yeah,
they
I
were
know.
up 6-4, and they popped all their ults and yet somehow actually didn't get a tick.
Yeah, 6-4, and Sureforce still had EMP. Actually, and I don't want to put a lot, but you're watching on the screen right now. It's playing in the highlights. Nevik starts the engagement with like 87% ultimate, and then I think leaves the entire fight with like 95. Like, it was like super unfortunate that he just couldn't build that bomb in time. I mean, obviously, I know at one point he got demeched, he got remeched. But I think it almost would have been worth if we had played that slower until Nevis could have built his bomb, because he was at 87%. Like, I don't think it was like maybe necessarily set up properly. It was one of those things where we just wanted to take advantage of it. We just went in. Because I think the EMP bomb combo on Anubis 2 actually can be pretty good, especially when set up with a Nanoblade. And then you do the monkey ult to just sort of take control of a point and create more space. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit of a slower push. But yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's just unfortunate that we got like 99% and just
Yeah.
threw it out the window. It's like, oh.
Well, that was map 2. That was Anubis.
That was
No, I know. What I was talking about was Anubis. Was the second push
Yeah,
that
5 ults.
The 5 ults.
That was bad too. And we totally gave it up at some point. That's like, it's just so encouraging, discouraging at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the highlights take of that. I mean, like, you know, everyone came in saying that like Philly looks like the strongest team in the league right now, which I think we all have to take with a grain of salt, considering we haven't seen almost half of the league play at all yet.
Yeah.
But
I had them number 3 on my power ranking, so I mean, like, this
they
is
look
kind of
like
what
a
I
phenomenal
expected.
team, and they are performing. I'm not taking that away from them. But everyone came in thinking like this team is going to be dominant, and we gave them a run for their money. And when you really break down those maps, I do think that you're right. It could have gone in Toronto's favor if they handled a couple of situations better.
Yeah,
So.
And even the defense to get the draw, I think, was another situation where we had, it was like we like had ultimate, and you're about to see it on the screen in a bit, but I believe it was like we like picked 2, and then again it was one of those things where they were just somehow able to just get their way back and then use their ultimate, and it was better than ours, and that was unfortunate. But one thing I did want to talk about going on to map 3, because just Anubis just hurts my soul to think of how close we were, was I love, and Sureforce talked about it on stream, he tweeted about it afterwards, but I love how this team plays when they have EMP. It's not just like, we have EMP, we are going to use EMP and engage on that. Sureforce almost prefers to like have a fight or two when he has EMP and the other team's trying to play around it and just not use it. Like, it's like total mind games with Sureforce. Yeah, the mind game. And he tweeted about it afterwards.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because when you think about it, like, if you know the opposing team has an EMP, how do you play? Right? You split up so that the EMP doesn't catch all 6 of you. And then usually your hero, either the Zen or the Lucio, who has the defensive ult, in this case it was a Lucio, sort of hides, right? So that he's not affected by the EMP, and he can come in later with a beat and a defensive ult to mitigate the lack of abilities. And on Dorado, if you're Toronto and you're playing dive, what do you want, right? Like, you want the team to play separated. You want the healers to be, the squishies to be separated so that you can hack a target and isolate them. So we were able to win almost all the way to the very end of point 2 on Dorado without using 1 EMP, which I would have initially thought would have been our win condition.
Right.
Purely based off of his mind games.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. You're right. I can't contest that. Another thing on Rialto, which I thought was hilarious.
Dorado.
Chris,
why? Oh, I'm getting triggered.
I have it written down as Rialto here. That's why.
Maybe take better notes, you know?
Was it commentators? I think when it was either Sato or Poco be like dying, they're like, "Oh, Poco." He's like, "Oh, looks like," and he's on a red side. He's like, "Oh, looks like Poco's being sent to the glue factory." I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's hilarious!" Like, one of the casters said that.
Yeah, that's funny. I know for me, one of the points I wanted to talk about was, and what you guys thought about agilities and sort of, does he play Doomfist or does he play Genji? Because this was something that I noticed a couple times throughout the game. Was it seemed like he just couldn't decide whether he wanted to dive with Doom or whether he wanted to dive with Genji. And I think a couple different scenarios, it actually cost us. I think especially on map 5, where had we had a Nano Blade to recapture at one point, I think we could have won the fight based on that, but instead he went Doom and it just didn't work out. And then obviously the Meteor Strike's just not the same. What do you guys think about how that was sort of utilized?
I think that there were times where it worked very well. Like I think his Doomfist, like he popped off at times and did some pretty nutty things on Doom. Especially, I know on Anubis he got like a 4K and it was just like it happened in a flash. Like Doom's got that mid fight like capability and assassination potential, which is really potent. But as I think what we saw in some of their dive stuff is that they do play this kind of style of dive that is like it's about building ults but not necessarily popping the ults. Like when they took Anubis point one, they didn't even pop their ult. Like they popped Valk and they still got it, but everyone, like even the commentators were saying like, oh, they're building this comp around building their ults and executing on their ults. They don't necessarily need that, but the Genji empowers that to a whole other level. So it's tough. I mean, I see what you mean in that the Genji could have been a whole different thing, but as we were talking about before, it's not necessarily a guarantee, especially with the way the meta is, that when you pop all your Qs that you necessarily win, especially when Carpe is just like dominating teams when they're down like by 3 players. So it's kind of weird. I don't know if it would have necessarily swung the tide, but personally, I really like to see his Doomfist. I thought it was doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add there. You gotta hit the nails. You gotta hit the nails on the spot.
It's kind of it's like a what if thing, right? But I think the
Yeah.
nice thing about having Agilities is that he proved, especially in that game, that he's a serious weapon with either of those characters, and they're really like important characters to have right now in the Toronto's like sort of toolkit.
No, yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think he also makes it good, and the fact that the meta is, there is kind of like a main meta, but there are a lot of off metas that can be played.
Mhm.
Allows Toronto to build off of his skill. Because if it was a rigid meta like Goats, then if we play anything else, you'd be screwed. Then that wouldn't be possible. But this is one of the great things about 222 is that you can sort of have these new metas, and you can bring in players that aren't necessarily going to be playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I thought it worked a lot better when it was going up against heroes that weren't McCree. Like on Anubis, for instance, they were running the Reaper at points. They were running the Hanzo at the start. And then when you go up against the McCree, I sort of like Genji's ability to deflect the flashbang. And I don't necessarily. I think his Doomfist is actually probably looks at points better than his Genji. It was just sort of one of those things where I'm like, I just want you to stick with one. But like
Right.
with control with 99% and you just need one fight, that was sort of when I was like, maybe you keep the Nano Blade, because it is, even if it doesn't work. I know he used it once and it didn't really get a lot of value. It still requires a ton of resources to shut down. So I sort of just want him to stick with one, as opposed to like consistently swap back and forth. But no.
Well, hopefully, what they'll kind of find or figure out is like a sort of a situational awareness where he will know based on the situation what the right pick is for the thing. Like, do they need the mid fight sustain or like the mid fight assassination, or do they need that ult to get that one pivotal fight? And so he'll know based on that what to go on. I mean, that's what you hope for, right?
Yeah. And then the last point I want to bring up for this before we get on to previewing Toronto's 2 matches coming up was just once again a strength of this team, and it's something we did not have all of last year, even when we were 5-2, is just their ability to adapt. And I wanted to say how much of a bright spot that was for me with this team. My best example is Kings Row. When we're defending first point, and I only noticed it the second watch through, but Philadelphia Fusion actually goes up the hotel to take the point the first time. And the first time they just roll us, right? Like they go up to the hotel, they jump over, and they immediately catch Kariv out of position, and then they capture first point immediately. And then when we have to hold them the second time, when they only have a minute left, right? That's where like the whole clip that's been going around Twitter, right? Where Kariv throws the nade against Agility's wall and Surefour flashbangs a shield and they instantly picked them off. Like it was this really cool set play, and it seemed like it was one of those things that we must have adapted because they saw how it worked against them the first time, and they pulled out of their pocket on defense the second time, and it looked way better. Now we still ended up losing the point, but I still thought it was a really cool adaptation by the Toronto Defiant, and it's something I'm looking forward to seeing them do more in the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, one of the big takeaways I had from that whole game was just that they were a team that didn't just get counted out when they went down 2-0, and this is like the team that everyone's saying is the strongest team, and they didn't keep trying to run the same thing into them, and they didn't just get discouraged and let themselves get rolled. So I thought that was very encouraging, and I agree. I think there's a lot of adaptation, a lot of tenacity in that team.
Yeah. No, I'm super excited. So, with that out of the way, Chris, do you have any other final thoughts before we move on to previewing Atlanta and Houston?
No, let's move on to Toronto, Houston. They're gonna get
Toronto,
Houston's
Atlanta.
gonna get clapped. Okay, now Atlanta.
We play Atlanta first, right? Yeah, let's talk about.
It was a bet. Okay.
Yeah, you say the bit to the end.
I mean,
okay.
What more do you need to say about Outlaws, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's gonna be a quick discussion. But if they're not sick, who knows? They might get some Advil, and then they're scary. But yeah, let's talk about Atlanta. We play them.
Sponsored by Advil.
Yeah, exactly. Aspirin just comes in, turns their season around. What a good sponsorship. Imagine if Houston ends up winning the grand finals and they're like, it's all thanks to Advil. But
we're doping the whole time.
Exactly. But yeah, let's get into Atlanta. That's the team we play first, Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern. If anyone's interested in watching that, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that.
Yeah.
After watching them play Philadelphia, which was supposed to be, like you said, one of the best teams, and what people have seen, and then going to Atlanta, which was in a lot of people's power rankings, one of the best teams. How much of a chance do you think Toronto has to clean this one up?
Well, personally, I think they have a very good chance. I think that on paper, anyway, which take from that what you will, I think Philly looked like a stronger team than the Reign did, at least coming into the season.
Mm-hmm.
And if they could do that against Philly, then there's no reason to think that they couldn't make equally as competitive a game and have it go the way of Defiant. Like.
Yeah,
I'll see if Reign is being scarier than Philly.
I do see a world in which the Atlanta Reign are a better team than the Philadelphia Fusion. Now they're not on my power rankings. If you guys watch my power rankings, I don't think they are. I do think Philadelphia is better, but there is a world, especially in a May McCree meta, where I would argue Edison Erster could potentially be the best May McCree duo in the league. I know that's a big thought since we haven't seen them play yet. But if Edison is as hyped up as I think people think he is, and you've seen Erster on May, this could be the best May McCree duo in the Overwatch League. So I do think there's a world in which they do come out and perform better. But yeah, I'm excited to see. Chris, what do you think is going to happen?
I think 3-2 Toronto.
Why?
Why? Because I can't say 3-2 Atlanta. That would just be unpatriotic.
Yeah, you're too Canadian.
I'm too Canadian.
Okay, but what's their win condition, right? Like how do the Toronto Defiant beat Atlanta Reign?
I think that we're
both of you.
We're talking about how good May McCree is. I think our win condition is making sure those two can't play off of each other. They're good as a team. We want to make sure that we use our zoning and use space to be able to shut down both those guys. And I think we did it pretty well against
Philly
Fusion, Philly Fusion, and not in the first game, a little bit less in the second game. But we've started to figure out how to use our space through dive to shut them down. And I think that if we can use our space in the same sort of way and have proper scouting with that's a win condition.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth noting that we were just talking about how we managed to sort of contain a guy like Carpe, and I'm sure Edison is a nutty player, but you got to admit that Carpe has consistently been one of, if not the top DPS in the Overwatch League or in Overwatch as a whole. Since it's been an esport. So I mean, unless Edison is like head and shoulders better than Carpe, which would be something to see, then I think that they can at least potentially handle them. You know what I mean?
For me, I more thought Erster was the more jump in the DPS lineup because Erster's May was probably right there with Nero in terms of who was playing the best May at the end of stage 4 and in the playoffs. Because Urster's May is like disgusting. So yeah, if Edison's as cracked as people say he is, and he can kind of compete with Carpe, I think that could be a scary DPS lineup. But sorry, continue your point.
No, I was just gonna say that's a very valid point. I think that like maybe we won't see Nevix eating 5 ults this game against Urster, but I do think there's a bit of a rock paper scissors between Toronto and Atlanta, where the DPS I give the edge to Atlanta, but I do think we have a stronger tank line, and the support line I think we have a slight edge, just mostly because of Kareev. Because I think that Dogman is probably better than Calyx, but I think
Massa better than Calyx,
Oh, sorry, Massa is, but I think Massa is better than Calyx, but I don't know, otherwise if they really got anyone that can put on Kareev's level.
I was gonna say I kind of agree with you in the sense that I got really sick and tired. I don't know why I had this aggression towards Atlanta, but I know rivalry isn't really a thing, especially in Overwatch. It just hasn't been long enough to really create those storylines. You kind of got shocked in Vancouver, but that's really the only one. But man, I don't know for what it is, but I do not like Atlanta Reign. Like if I could win one game and upset one of these big 3, 4, or 5 teams, it'd be the Atlanta Reign. So I really hope we can take them, because I got so sick and tired of throughout the offseason everybody talking about how Toronto was a bottom 5 team because our tank line sucked. And Beast, Halo, and Nevix were unproven, but Atlanta is top 2 because apparently Gator and Hawk are the Western second coming of Mono and Mecha. You know what I mean? Like, it just never made any sense to me.
Yeah.
And they totally can be good, but I don't know how you'd say Nevix and Beast were bad, and then in the same breath say Gator and Hawk are going to be amazing and they're going to be a top 3 team. Like, that logic never really made sense to me. And they might be really good, but I think if we're going to win this game, Beast and Nevix outplaying Gator and Hawk, and hopefully getting on those first game nerves, because it is their first game Atlanta's playing. That's how I think we're going to have to beat this team. Yeah,
and just one thing I did want to kind of point out is I don't understand the hype on Gator. He last season he was okay, but he was by no means a top tank in the league, and he was kind of in a position battle with Bokbo for a good part of the season.
All season. I think he debuted in the playoffs, and everyone's like, well, how did he play? Look at him play Sigma. And I'm like, Sigma literally came out a week before the playoffs happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people hadn't even mastered the hero yet, and he was broken. It was one of those things where he looked really good when no one played it.
Yeah, I almost wonder if they do run a Pokepo and Gator lineup and run the double shield.
Yeah, I think that when teams first, that's what they were doing initially in scrims. I was listening to Tactical Crowd's podcast, and they mentioned that, but I think they've swapped over since. I think they do run Gator and Hawk for the communication. But you're right. It's one of those things where if you don't even have Hawk in the lineup and you just run Rhino Orisa, I think we beat them. If I see Rhino Orisa consistently, I think Toronto Defiant beats them. My only concern about the Defiant is I still have slight reservation about if they are if them versus Philly was last year's Chengdu versus Titans. You know what I mean? Where it was sort of Toronto Defiant, everyone thought Philadelphia was going to win. We sort of came in there. We threw some strategies that they weren't expecting. Chengdu did that versus the Shock, right? Where they or Titans, I believe, where they started beating them.
The ball strat, right?
The ball strat, right, with the triple DPS. So it kind of caught the Titans off guard. Then they started losing, and then Chengdu switched over to Goats, and the final map or map 3, it was Junkertown or whatever, and actually ended up beating them in a Goats matchup, and everyone was like, "Whoa!" And then they ended up losing 3-2, and they didn't get the reverse sweep. So I wonder how much of Toronto Defiant's victory was just them maybe cheesing a little bit the Philadelphia Fusion, where Philly just wasn't expecting the dive, and we countered them in that position, but now teams are going to expect and prepare for the dive, and it's oh, you're running dive, we're just going to run Reaper Brigida. Like, we're just going to go
Yeah.
Brigana. We're going to go May Reaper. And then we're going to keep Ryan Diva and, like, dive into us. Like, have fun, see what happens. Or they prepare a counter Sombra strategy, right? Like, it's one of those things where now that we've shown our cards and we like to play dive, will teams be able to counter it? And if we do have to run the mirror matchup, can we... I know Surefour, again, clutched King's Row, where we went down 2 people and he got 5 final blows in a row. I know he has that potential to pop off, but can he do it consistently enough over an entire match playing against, like I said, Edison Erstern and a really good Atlanta Reign team?
I guess I'll just have to wait and find out.
Yeah. So I have a hard time giving it to Toronto. And also the scouting. Final point is they've seen us play twice. We haven't seen them play once.
Yeah, although the counter argument to that at the same time is that they haven't had any league experience, so they're coming in a bit cold. They haven't had the level of competition on the stage since last year's playoffs. So
and for
that may work against them.
Edison, first time playing on the stage. Hawk, first time playing on the stage, right? That's 2 rookies. Gator didn't play a lot, so I think the nerves are going to hit them more than most. And it's still mixed roster. Edison's never played on a mixed team before. I don't think so, at least. Maybe I should double check that. I think he played Korean Contenders. Unless he played Atlanta Academy, then I take it back. Either way, I'm super excited. I'm actually going to I'm going to drink the juice. I'm going to go to Toronto. I'm going to go Toronto 3-1. Fuck it. I'm going to Toronto 3-1. Because I think if it actually goes to a map 5, we lose. I think they're just a mechanically superior team. I think they win the control maps, especially if we continue to play Logics and Agilities. I think it's either going to be 3-1 Defiant or 3-2 Atlanta. But I'm going 3-1 Defiant.
Okay.
All right, now let's move on to the conversation, the teams, the match of the week. Toronto Defiant versus the one, the only. Second place in the toilet bowl, Houston Outlaws.
Are they not? I thought they were at the bottom because they lost to Boston.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Second place in the toilet bowl. The toilet bowl was Houston versus Boston, right?
Oh, I see. That
was the meme
oh,
going
my
around.
Goodness, yeah.
They were the toilet bowl, map 7, and they couldn't do it. So I think the real question is 3-1 or 3-0 Defiant. What do you guys? what do you guys think?
No, 3-1 because we suck at control.
That's a little too aggressive. I don't want to be too cocky and then watch Houston just, like I said, get healthy and roll.
Yeah,
roll.
I mean, I think it's super easy to laugh at Houston because they have had such a rough start.
Yeah.
But I do think it's like the biggest mistake Toronto could make playing this team is taking them too lightly.
Completely agree.
Because don't forget, like, Meko is an excellent off tank. They've got great players that just they're not gelling, and they've got people that are really underperforming. Well, I don't want to say underperforming, but maybe are kind of declining in their overall play. Like Muma has played. I think this is the worst I've ever seen him play.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, guys like Blase's been actually like surprisingly good considering I didn't even think he was going to be a starting DPS for this team.
Yeah, I think his McCree's been pretty. I think that's one of the. I think his McCree's been pretty weak when you look at the rest of the field. But I do agree that when he has swapped over to those other heroes, he's performed well.
Yeah, and I think Jexy has actually been surprisingly solid.
Jexy's been nuts. Yeah, no, I agree.
Like he's been a guy that's really anchored this team, even when they're falling apart. So I don't know, like if a couple of these guys can start to get their stuff together, they're going to look a lot less laughable really quickly.
I was going to say, I think with Toronto Defiant might actually be their own worst enemy, whereas they finally showed these teams, hey, you don't have to run McCree May to be successful. You can run dive. And I think Houston's team actually can run a pretty decent dive, assuming communication gets in order. Like if you run Blase, I think Blase's McCree hurts them. He just doesn't compare to Carpe or BQB, like these other Corey, right? These other better McCree players that we've seen. He
got completely outplayed by his former teammate Color Hex, right? Like
exactly.
Color Hex dominated him on the McCree.
Yeah. So I think Jerry played the McCree, but yeah, I know what you mean. If Color Hex had a really good game too, it's one of those things where it's like if you can play Blase on the Doomfist, which he's known for, and you can play like Dante on Sombra, Muma on Monkey, Meko gets to play the Diva, and then you run like whatever you want to run, Raucous or Repel. Flip a coin, put one of them in, and you run sort of a similar composition that Toronto Defiant just ran versus Philly. I think they can actually be more successful. I think had they ran that against Boston, they would have won instead of trying to run the mirror match with Blase on McCree. So that's my one. Like, if they do get healthy, if they are like really sick, hydration also on the team. If they are really sick and maybe they finally get healthy, again, when communication's the issue, the more you play, the longer you play together, the more that sort of fixes itself. I do think, yeah, there could be a possibility for them to show some life, but I don't see Toronto Defiant losing that game.
No, personally, I don't either. But I'm going to make a little bit of a bold prediction, and I see that potentially going to be a 3-2 game.
3-2. 3-2 Defiant?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
That's okay.
I do think Defiant's a worse first half team. I could see us losing either 2CP or the first control map. I think we're a better escort team. We're a better hybrid team. It sort of plays less brawly. It plays more like, you kind of set up fights a lot better. So I do see a world in which it goes 3-1. I don't think we lose both, though. I think we can take one of 2 CPs. I'm saying 3-1 Defiant.
I concur.
Okay.
So we're all homers then. We're all rooting for Defiant this week.
I know. At some point, I gotta pick another team, and maybe
I can't just go 2-3 Defiant against a lot. Be like, nah, he's just gonna win against Defiant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think nobody should pick Houstoun against Defiant. I think at that point you're really stretching. Atlanta for sure. I think Atlanta should be the favorites. I think nerves are a thing. I think when you looked at how teams looked in their first game, a lot of teams looked shaky. I think Atlanta's going to come in there shaky, like you said, cold, Eric. It's a good way to put it. A lot of people making their debut. And yeah, I think Defiant's shown that they can super adaptable. They can run some really cool strategies, and I think they can take it.
Okay, sweet.
All right.
So Eric, is there anything you wanted to say before we head out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, again, if you've listened to this podcast, and by now, if you've checked out the Toronto Overwatch Beer League at overwatchtoronto.org, if you want to sign up, today's the day. Register as an individual. Otherwise, you will have to wait until the fall for season 6. And if you want to check it out, if you can't participate, but you want to watch, we do play our games on Sundays, and we stream them on Twitch with casters at twitch.tv/ Overwatch Toronto.
Yeah. Just send us the link, and we'll put that in the description. We'll link all that stuff for you guys. It'll be in the description below, right beside that like button.
And that subscribe button.
Yeah, quick little plug.
And that bell.
Eric gets the plug. We also get the plug. So, but yeah, we'll put it in the description if you guys are interested in checking that out for sure.
Okay. So we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, enjoy.
And thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Always a pleasure.